Hi everyone, it's Coach Fred. I'm back again, and today I'm going to be reviewing factoring. So in our last video on the difference of two squares, we looked at a factor pattern that involved two terms. And remember, we had a factoring process I want to make sure we're using. First, we're going to always check for a GCF. We're going to identify the number of terms it has. If it has two terms, we're going to look for the difference of squares. It may not be. Got to make sure it meets that rule. Then we move on to three terms. If it's three terms, we first, no matter what, want to look for a perfect square trinomial, which is what we're going to talk about today. I call them PSTs for short, a perfect square trinomial. And again, you want to look for this first if there are three terms. All right, so let's talk about a perfect square trinomial. In the multiplying polynomials review, we looked at binomials that were raised to the 2 power, and we asked to multiply them, okay? So this is a binomial square, or the square of a binomial. Now, you had to break that up. You couldn't distribute that 2. That would be very bad algebra. You had to break it up into two things and then multiply it. Now, I'm going to do it really quickly here so that you can see it. I'm going to use the area model, because I want you to clearly see it. So I had x and 5 and x and 5. Well, anytime we multiply the same number by itself, we're going to get a square. So that's going to be the case and in that box, and so in this box as well. Those are going to be perfect squares. But if these numbers are exactly the same and the same sign, well, then we're going to get two that are exactly the same. So when we put them together, it's always going to be double that number. So it would work out to be x squared plus 10x plus 25. And that's how we determine if it is a perfect square trinomial, or a PST. You want to check, is the first term a perfect square? Because let me write it here so you can see with me. And it is. Is the last term a perfect square and positive? Because remember, when you multiply, even if these were negative 5s, it would make it a positive number. And it is. Now here's the hard part. Is the middle term twice the product of the square root of the first and last term? Well, their square root would be x and 5. So if I multiply 5 times x, this number needs to be double that, which is how we came up with it. If it is, it's a perfect square trinomial. And so to factor it, it's super easy. We're going to write it as the square of a binomial, and x and 5, so you take the square roots, and the sign is always going to be the sign of the middle term. Okay? Now you did learn this already. This is a review. So hopefully that's coming back to you. I might have said a couple of things that made it stand out in your mind. All right, let's practice. So x squared plus 6x plus 9. It is a trinomial. I look for a greatest common factor. Don't see one other than 1. So I check to see, is it a PST? Is it a PST? That's always first on my mind. Okay, is the first term a perfect square? Yes. Last term a positive perfect square? Yes. I quickly write their roots down. If I multiply those two numbers, is this number double it? Yes, it really doesn't matter what the sign is, so don't worry about the sign. So factored form, I take those roots I found, I take the sign of the middle term, and I make it a binomial square, or the square of a binomial. All right, x squared minus 10x plus 25. Perfect square, positive perfect square, write down their roots. 5 times x is 5x, double that is 10x. Again, we don't want to worry about the sign. So I'm going to write my answer as a product of a binomial square, x, 5, and I'm going to bring my sign with me. Those are perfect square trinomials. Nice and easy. All right, a little harder. I give you bigger numbers. Again, walk through the process. Does it fit the form of a perfect square trinomial? 25 and x squared are perfect squares. 1 is a perfect square because 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 squared is 1. Okay, and I take the roots of each of those. I multiply them. Is this number double that? It is. It's a perfect square trinomial. And if it's double, we want to recognize that number will always be an even number. If it's odd, you know for sure it's not a perfect square trinomial. All right, so we've got 5x, we've got 1, we've got the sign of the middle term, quantity squared. All right, last one. Remember, don't want to forget step 1, factor out a GCF. These aren't perfect squares, so it would make me think, oh gosh, do I have a GCF? And I do. They are all, their greatest common factor would be 2. I take that out, 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. Okay, I have a trinomial, 3 terms. Is it a PST? So perfect squares, positive perfect squares, 2x, 1, and if I multiply, that's double. So I can write it as the square of a binomial. All right, guys, so that's how you factor a perfect square trinomial. I don't want you to forget, though, this is always the first thing you want to look for. It makes it so much easier. Now, I do have a really cool way to do this in your head. If you're interested in practicing the factor pattern, look at one of the bonus videos on multiplying binomial squares. Have a great day.